I'm good. How are you?
Good, nice to hear. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. It's nice that our time zones sync up, so it's not too late there and it's not too late here. So it's good that it's worked well. So I appreciate it.
Of course, of course. Good to see you. I have a cold, but I should be able to answer your questions.
Oh well, thank you very much, and I appreciate you coming on. So that definitely demonstrates resilience before we've even started. So I love that. So how's the start of your week been? It's very early on in the week, of course, but how's it been going so far?
So far, so good.
Good to hear. So for you in a typical week, then how does that look for you? Very different, I suppose.
What do you mean?
So in terms of, whether you're coaching clients, whether you're,
Yes.
preparing different workshops,
Yeah.
the variation of different things that you do, because from everything that I've read from author, speaker, in terms of coaching, there's a nice combination of different things for you, which is you get to stay up
Yeah.
to date with everything as well as delivering the process. So I suppose that's quite a good sort of mix and match, I suppose.
Exactly. Sometimes I'm in schools delivering, keynote talks, and sometimes I'm on the Zoom coaching people, and sometimes, there's all kinds of things. I'm doing a workshop. It's all over.
And when it comes to that, then, you get to see the different audiences and different sort of demographics of individuals, because you might go into a high school and see, right, a load of kids who might be showing a real lack of resilience at the moment. And it might be because of the environment or educational terms, or it might be, you might see then some adults display it in a different type of workshop. So for you, it's good to be in that context because it gives you that wider variation of different groups then, which is really good.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So resilience is something which I'm really passionate about, and something which I
Right.
consider massively, because I'm an educator myself by day,
Mhm.
and then I coach as well. And combining this with a podcast, and I'm currently in the middle of a module in part of university as coaching and mentoring. So this fits in really nicely with personal interest as well as some academic,
Mhm.
in terms of what I do in my job as well. So your time is
Right.
more than appreciated, because it's not just about the podcast. There's so many different levels. So a big thanks for me.
Awesome. Ah, you're so welcome. And thank you for being an educator, because it's not easy in today's world. So,
I
yeah.
completely agree. And I suppose in my first question then to you is, resilience is something whereby when I work with some of the young people that I teach with every day, and when I look back at myself as a student and some of the things that they can't comprehend, that they really struggle with, and they display some mental health signs, they display behavior triggers, all of these things. When I was their age and I consider what they're going through now and maybe the way they react, they're the sort of things that I would never have reacted to, or maybe just accepted them. And sometimes I look at that as personality, maybe experience and environment, and look at all the various considerations. But then I
Yeah.
think, oh, is it a bigger picture in terms of the changing times in education, the world, all these
Right.
different components, and therefore
Mhm.
are young people and individuals lacking resilience perhaps more than they were 10, 15 years ago, for example?
I think, we definitely do live in a different world from when we grew up, right? So, what I've seen with a lot of the educators that I get to coach is that there's this unwavering commitment to continue to give and continue to give without recognizing the necessity of giving to yourself so you can give to others. So I don't know that we need more resilience. I think that we've forgotten this critical component of filling our own cup so we can help other people with what we do every day.
I like the way that you frame that there in terms of filling your own cup. So, rather than seeing it as need more resilience, it's actually looking at maybe what your qualities are and building upon what they are. But that self realization of what they could be takes coaching within itself. And when you're a coach and you're trying to get to those steps, and therefore you're essentially establishing a strategy within that process, that
Yes.
first step of that realization and trying to figure out what those qualities are, how would you go about doing that with a person?
Yeah, it's so interesting because oftentimes I get the phone call when the teacher is on the brink of burning out or on the brink of resigning, right? Or is just so overwhelmed that they come to a call and they're in tears because they're looking for a lifeline. So oftentimes the first thing I will ask them is to like explain to me, what have they done for themselves? Have they done anything for themselves? And more than likely they haven't. So what we like to do is measure sort of what their day-to-day practices are, but then what is their mindset? There are two pieces to the puzzle: how they view adversity and stress, and how they're caring for themselves. And most of the time, because they've been in this like fight or flight mode to just keep going, it's hard for them to have a positive outlook on adversity or increased stress. There becomes this narrative around the victim, and then there's anger, resentment, frustration. So I like to just get them present on the impact that they're having on those around them that they love, that love them. Oftentimes, people don't realize how overwhelmed and overstressed at work unfolds in their marriages and in their home life. So if I can get them to see the impact of you in this state on the ones that you love and love you, is reason enough for you to try something different.
I love the way that you put that again, that impact on the ones that you love, and therefore the way that that can come across, and how that maybe might frame a personal life and then take that into a professional setting as well, and how it might then affect others, and therefore maybe they're not realizing how that is playing out, and therefore those factors are leading them to becoming angry and upset within the process, and it leads them to this very distressed state, and as to why they may not show resilience. And therefore I think it comes down to a little bit of perspective then, because both myself and you could be line managers of an individual, and I could see that this individual is becoming very stressed and becoming very short of me, and I might become very frustrated with them because of the way we're having that communication, whereby they could go then and approach you about the project, and therefore you go, actually, do you need a bit more breathing space on this? And therefore, why do you need that breathing space? I think sometimes it comes down to perspective. And I think it's a two-part play in terms of that, in terms of the groups and individuals involved and understanding what resilience is. And I think it's a big picture to really consider in that holistic view, which is really important when you bring that across into that perspective and avenue which you have.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, I think I don't know. Here in the States, it's a different, I don't know what the landscape is over there with education, but it seems like it's like a constant changing environment for these poor teachers, right? There's new initiatives being thrown at them. They have parents that are frustrated, so they express their frustration to the teacher. You have students with these behavioral challenges that they now have to navigate in the classroom. It's like they just constantly get hit with all these different experiences. And we have to really reiterate, if we know that stress is inevitable, the only power we have is how well we are equipped to deal with that stress. And then that comes down to, what am I doing to empower myself to handle this the best possible way, a way in which I'm proud of myself.
Again, a really nice way that you put that, and a quote and a sort of clip in terms of how that will come across in terms of that stress and empowerment, because I'm just thinking of some of the young people that I say there, and the way that that landscape is changing, as you say, in the US. I think we're at a very similar stage here in the UK as well. So therefore, I think we're at a worldwide change in perspective of when it comes to it, because even when you talk and educate some of the young people, they're not aware of what's going around them in the wider world, and therefore they're only focused in their little bubble in what happened in their neighborhood, etc. And therefore, when they don't consider the bigger picture, I feel that it's a bit of a lack of education. But then you have to consider their lack of home lives at the moment, and their lack of commitment to homework, and how that might come across. And therefore, when they're utilizing social media in a way and just scrolling through TikTok and seeing some of the general news and things, they're not really understanding what the bigger terms are. So therefore, when it comes down to, looking at them more towards a person-centered approach away from the bigger issues, when you look at how they respond to situations, is because they lack that understanding. So therefore, when we come to education in the classroom, we're trying to teach them something and they're not grasping it. It's because they don't really understand some of the lower level concepts. So therefore, if they're lacking that level of lower concept, then they're not going to understand the holistic or higher education or those views, and therefore that's why they might become frustrated. So I can think of a young person today. I supported them in going back to the lesson, and initially they didn't want to go to the lesson because they felt that they have fallen so far behind. Automatically they've gone, right, I'm not going to ask teacher for help, I'm not going to access the room, I'm not going to maybe look at what my peers are doing, so it's easier for me to avoid the lesson. Whereby I was able then to get them into a lesson after a bit of a conversation with them, and they realized, and a discussion with the teacher was, well, actually, I can help you. Actually, I got these handouts, and actually, I'm going to sit with you and do this. But I think it was that initial step for that young person in going, right, I don't see this playing out the way that I need it to. I'm going to maybe feel a little bit embarrassed, and therefore, why would I put myself in that situation if I can avoid it altogether?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, makes sense.
So we're definitely at that landscape. And I was talking to a senior leader the other day, and we've always said like education is at a higher level and well-being has perhaps been a lower block of that level, but we're seeing it come to terms at a very even stage right now, and that's the way our landscape is sort of changing. So I know that you look at mental health as a big issue, and a lot of people are saying, oh, mental health didn't exist in my day, and we didn't have these sort of concepts of it, and you get to see that with the older generation. Right? That is a generational change as well, because the world they had to the world that we've got now is very, very different, and perhaps the older generation were a bit more resilient in terms of what they've gone through and how they were brought up, etc. But it's about developing resilience for the young people that we have now, which is perhaps lacking. So I think we're definitely at that stage where the landscape is changing, both for a personal perspective for those young people, but for a wider one as well in terms of the groups and demographics that we have.
You know, we're human beings. We're complex human beings having, you know, a very diverse life experience. For us to think that we, you know, have to just pretend we're not dealing with life is kind of crazy, right? Like we're human beings. So like it's interesting because I started as a mental health advocate, just wanting to really normalize the conversation around mental health. But for me, I honestly was like, why are we not proactively getting ahead and talking about our emotional well-being and how we're feeling? Why are we not getting ahead of it and talking about it before it becomes something? You know, so that's why I said, why are we not talking about resilience? Why are we not talking about boosting resilience? And then we created resilience as a lifestyle so that people recognize the importance of filling their cup every day so they can ebb and flow with whatever comes at them. You know, that's what we want. Ultimately, we want people to be able to handle the stress, the adversity without it devouring them and without having to climb back, you know, and, you know, have to do some really like hard navigating. Instead, if you take good care of yourself and there happens to be an upset that occurs in your world, you're going to go with the flow. It's going to be a lot less challenging to navigate if you have practices in place that help you take care of yourself physically and mentally.
And again, the way that you put that, I think, is really important. And trying to get ahead of it is really a great consideration, because just thinking again to some of the young people that I work with in terms of our provisions and how we're trying to implement them, it is trying to get ahead and look at those emotional barriers, perhaps that some of the young people are facing. And therefore, why aren't they accessing their education or their lessons as we want them to? And how can we get ahead and put those preventions in place, so therefore their truancy levels or perhaps their attainment, it starts to improve over time. Their attainment improves, but their truancy decreases. So therefore, we should see a level out in terms of access to education to where it should be. And so for us, we are trying to get ahead of it. But when you look at some of the organizations or perhaps institutions that we have in terms of sports clubs, etc., and taking a different viewpoint, they're not perhaps getting ahead of it. And therefore, when you see perhaps an individual underperforming to your expectations, then therefore they're like, well, actually, this player or individual hasn't attained what we'd like them to. And therefore they might discard this individual because they're going, right, we got another 10 who might come through. And it's very easy for that sort of organization because they've got a conveyor belt whereby an individual can be easily replaced. But the way that you put it there is we are all humans. And sometimes we don't consider that human element in the process, which is the most important thing, because it's very easy for us to go, yeah, we'll get a new individual in to play in that position or replace you. But then when you've discarded this player and they've got to live their life, all they might remember is they were released, they were replaced very quickly, they were just another one on the conveyor belt. And for them, you haven't really taught them anything other than they can just be easily discarded, where I think that does come into play in sport quite a lot.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I don't know. I discarding people is just not something in my vocabulary. So it's very interesting to hear that. I just think that we're human beings and we should be accepted for who we are, every which experience that we're having, you know?
And the way that you put that, fill your cup, it really resonates with me in terms of a reflection of, there is someone over here who's giving a great talk and he talks about a jam jar. And so it's very similar to the way that is fill the cup. And when he says that it might reach a capacity whereby it might overflow, he just says, I'll just go and get another jam jar. So for someone, when they might fill their cup, they might really struggle in terms of placing enough in their cup to really go, oh, actually, I've still got these areas lacking. And therefore, when they're lacking, it gives a bit of a coaching perspective then, because you might look at qualities they want to develop or some qualities which they might not have realized. So then it's coaching them into a mindset whereby, well, actually, you need to realize you have these qualities. How could you take them and moving forward? Or what do we need to do to get them at that point? So I think coaching, how that comes across is really important. And communication fits into that as well as a real important consideration. So when you are coaching an individual and you're asking questions and you have different type of communication, what do you pose with an individual when they're trying to find those qualities or you're trying to pull them out of the individual?
You know, it's interesting. I had this conversation this morning with a cancer survivor. We were just talking about the concept of hope and the concept of whether or not you believe you can overcome something, right? It's like all in the mindset. We were talking extensively about mindset and your experience in general. So like one of the things I ask my clients is, do you believe that life happens to you or do you believe that life happens for you? This is a very insightful question to ask, because if they believe that life is happening to them, then they don't really understand that they have agency, and they're less curious as to why something is happening. They're more in disagreement with it, therefore they can't get the lesson. So really, that question has so much to do with revealing their mindset about adversity, about challenging situations. You know as well as I do, if you believe you can, you're halfway there. You want people, and I would think you would want the people that you're coaching to believe in their potential, because that's half the battle, right? If you believe that I have the potential, then you're going to dig deep and find that potential. If you don't believe it, then you're going to be very resigned and very passive about exploring and really pushing your limits. Adversity shows us our capacity to what we can do. So I'm training, for example, I'm training for High Rocks. High Rocks is a very intense fitness competition. And every single time I push myself, I turn around and I look in the mirror and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. But what is that doing? That's building my pride. That's building my sense of self. If I didn't push myself to push the sled or do something hard, I'd never recognize what I have within me. So I think that that's a really important, like we have to have people see adversity and challenge as the tool that reveals to us our capacity.
And I think that's important there in terms of that revealing that capacity, because again, thinking of some of the young people that I have, they might not even consider what they have as potential. They might not even understand that there is potential. And when it comes to that capacity of what they may have the opportunity to explore or maybe even reveal over that time, I think for them, they would even struggle to say, to get to that capacity because of their lack of experiences. So whereby you're in that real intense training program to get to that level, you can take certain elements away, especially over training, especially when you compete at different events, especially if you're going and meeting with other people in terms of a social element. And then you can take sort of qualities away from your work and then qualities maybe from other areas of your personal life, for example. But when some of these young people that I work with, their backgrounds might be very deteriorated and therefore they might struggle to take qualities away. They're not really enjoying education, so therefore they might lack some. and therefore then in their other consideration of their experiences, they're very limited and far few between. So they might not play for a sports club, they might not be in social groups, they might not even go out to do things like the cinema, etc. So when you've got all three sort of different avenues which we can consider, they don't even tend to look for qualities within that, but there might be qualities hidden which then might go, actually, have you thought about trying this? And initially their thought process might be, well, actually, I don't want to do this because I don't want to talk to other people, I don't want to meet people, and therefore it's maybe a lack of resilience of just getting over that threshold of going into a new building and seeing a new group and sitting with them. But then it's like, well, actually, we need to utilize the qualities that we have, whereby you're not enjoying the situation, but what are the elements that we can really pull out where we can go, actually, you do well at this, you do well at that, we can improve here. And then just building on, oh, actually, I realize I'm actually good at this. And therefore, if I just flip my mindset towards approaching this lesson or topic in a different way, then I could actually be really good at it and therefore bang that potential. So you end up reaching that sort of hoorah moment in terms of where they realize, and just that little flick of a switch can be so important when it comes to a person. And that really relates to the work that you're doing and the way that you presented that in terms of how that comes across as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We need to help people realize what they're capable of. I mean, it's an energy thing too. It raises our energy when we are filling ourselves with that pride that we realize when we do challenge ourselves and realize that we have the capacity to do more. It's a good space to play in. It's a really healthy place to play in, is to really always be thinking about, how do we grow? How do we expand? How do we become a little bit better? I mean, we're here to grow.
For sure, I completely agree in terms of that, and both personally, and then when it comes to those that we work with. And part of the module and studies that I'm having at the moment, and just even thinking of for you when you're working with that sort of cancer patient that you had or individual, they've gone through something which has been so difficult maybe for us to really comprehend in terms of the pain that they've felt, in terms of what they've gone through physically, the mental side in terms of just even being told that they have that, and it being confirmed to them and starting that journey and what they might have gone through. So when you have something so difficult and in that situation, which can be a real sort of tough topic to discuss with someone, especially when they've gone through it and they might not feel comfortable even though they have gone through it and come out positive from it, it can be a tough conversation. Because I know I hosted someone who had cancer on the pod, and I felt sometimes I didn't want to ask certain questions because I didn't want to go into the nature of what may have made them feel uncomfortable. But they really wanted to talk about it. They really wanted to bring this across, and that's why they come on the podcast to share that story. So when it comes down to that sort of individual and how difficult conversations can have and different coaching styles, we had it through a camera, and it worked well because we had a bit of a personal relationship. We spoke quite a lot up beforehand. But when it comes to someone who might have that and they approach you, is there certain different coaching styles which you might deploy when you work with those individuals?
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm talking to this gentleman about potentially helping other cancer patients to gather our stories, because this is a gentleman who has had decades of health challenges and setbacks and being told he has X amount of months to live and he's still here. He's the definition of resilience in my eyes, because the one thing he's never lost along the way is hope. And I think oftentimes with a diagnosis, a terminal diagnosis, people are robbed of that fundamental hope. And therefore, if you are hopeless, you don't feel like you have any control, right? So when we talk about, we're talking about how could we go and make a difference for cancer patients who don't have hope? How do we breathe hope into a challenging, super challenging experience for them? The one thing they will always have control over is their mindset. And your mindset is so important, especially as the physical body is healing. I've studied a lot of different, mindset leaders and health leaders. If your mind focuses on the things that are good, you give yourself a chance to have a positive experience. But if you relinquish all of your power and your mindset to I'm done, I'm going to wait to die, then you have nothing. So the gift that we want to try to go out and do to help cancer patients is to reignite the possibility of hope, because hope is so important.
And I think that's important there, the way that you come across, reignite possibility of hope as it is so important, because mindset is so key. And the way that you were saying that, I was thinking, right, if we look at some of the coaching models, so therefore I've been studying the GROW model at the moment in terms of by John Whitmore. And I've also been studying the Achieve model, as well as Appreciative Inquiry. So they're the sort of three models which I've been looking at. And all of them talk about goals. And when we talk about goals, you might get an individual and their goal might be, right, to improve my attainment scores in education by doing X, Y, and Z. So therefore, it's very easy to create a strategy. But when you have someone from such a position whereby they lack that hope, their health condition isn't great, it might be very terminal and time is running out. When you look at goals, you might be right. Their goal might be to, to just enjoy life for the last few months. And that's realistically the most goals you can really give is a mindset goal, because that's what they only have control of, and that's what they can only enjoy in themselves. Because even though they've gone through that situation and the last outcome might be, the unfortunate position in terms of what happened at the end of cancer, the mindset is so key, because that's what they've only got to really control, because their physical health they got no control of. They might be very limited in terms of their overall life experiences and being able to do things. So therefore, when you play that across and everything that you were saying, I completely was in agreement with that, because that is only what they've got during that position. And therefore, even for those who don't have a terminal position and they only see darkness and maybe, right, this tunnel ahead is going to be very dark for a long time, the mindset is so key to get them through that. And they might even go, oh, sir, but I'd leave school in 4 years. And that seems so long away for that young person. But then it's about little chunks and strategies that we can get them through the 4 years in terms of, right, we need to develop the mindset and go, actually, it's going to be 3 years because we're halfway through this year and we got to do this bit in these few months, and therefore it's 3 years. So when we look at it and try to break down in perspective, that can be really important in terms of our communication as well, in terms of steps, stages, periods of time, and how that might look for an individual as well.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. And that's why I get excited, because I think about impact. How I've measured my practice in the past few years since I've started it is all about impacting lives. There's nothing more gratifying, and I'm sure you see it as a coach too, to have people realize what's possible for themselves and see that moment where they're just like, I did not even realize what I was missing out on because of XYZ. It's all about impact and having people live in joy and live in a positive experience.
And when it comes down to that then, and those different experiences which you can give someone, and just reverting maybe to a different style that you might have in that communication, you might deliver it through a camera, you might deliver it one-to-one, you might look at small group settings, but then you might also consider very different types of coaching, where a lot of people think coaching is very directive. So your mindset will change. You're going to do this tomorrow. You're going to do that. However, coaching isn't that. And therefore, when it comes to your work, that's where the importance of facilitation, coaching, and all comes into play, which is so important. So for you and how that looks, how do you frame that? How do you bring that across? How do you utilize that?
It's an invitation. I feel like there's a lot of programs out there, coaching, life coaching, where it's very prescriptive, right? Okay, so if this is your goal, this is what you do, and this is what I tell you to do. In the case in which I coach from a place of an invitation, because I want people to have their own self-discovery and say to themselves, that's a different way. I have not tried that way. Maybe I should try that. Maybe I should consider this approach. Or thank you for sharing that with me. I think I'm going to try this. And it's really about supporting them and having small wins, because if they have small wins, those small wins compound over time. And that's what builds the momentum. And then they start to see substantial change. Like, for example, I measure 3 components when I get a client. We'll do a comprehensive resilience audit We'll walk through their practices, we'll walk through their mindset questions. And then we focus on three things: what's their energy, what's their stress, and what's their feelings of empowerment in their life. And those three are the barometer. So then we look at the areas of their life where they want to change. So through the audit, we ask a bunch of questions, but then it's really an opportunity just for them to look in the mirror and say, oh, wow, now that you've highlighted to me this, I see I have an opportunity that I can change that. So I'm going to take this on just for this week. And then when we meet next week, I'll let you know how that goes. And my whole goal is to have them have small wins. And because through every small win, they start to feel better, right? The barometer of the stress, empowerment, and energy starts to move. And I start to point that out. Look at the correlation. You actually did this, and now this is the result. So they can see that doing little things over time compounds. And at the end of the day, they just feel better.
I think that's important in terms of how that looks at those, how that focus looks across those three things that impact the areas of the life, and just maybe doing something which is beforehand in terms of that resilient audit, in terms of they might not even consider where they have different considerations, or where they even consider what their strengths might be, or where they're lacking, or where they're improving. So for those who might be just flipping this in perspective, of those who are listening and learning from it, if you're a coach and you're a sports coach and you've got a team in front of you and you really want to develop that resilience, well, actually you could ask your players just a standard questionnaire which you could either find online, or you might even develop one towards your team as you've developed your practice over a period. And once you do, you can ask a set of questions to really understand where the team are in terms of their mindset. And once you understand their mindset, you can start to tailor training a little bit more in terms of asking a lot of questions and being focused. Or you might deliver a workshop, or you might get a facilitator or professional like yourself in to utilize and explore those areas a little bit more, because sometimes we don't consider the players. Because part of my coaching was that I'm very heavily focused on the psychological conception of things and how that comes across. And then I'll look at more of our technical ability, then I'll look at our tactical, and then our physical. So once we look at that from a sports avenue, I'm always looking at it from a mindset. And I'll do the same when I'm educating my youngsters as well in terms of my classroom. And when we focus on that mindset and how that comes across in terms of all those considerations psychologically, some people and individuals will just take their teams just through, right, this is the tactics, this is our position, this is the game, and that is it, and just look at the personal and physical performance of it. Well, actually, you're not looking at, right, what might have that player struggled with mentally in that game? What are you asking of them? Are you giving them too many instructions? Have you communicated too much to them? Have you actually given them the space to ask questions? And I think a lot is, again, when you said about prescriptive coaching, I think sometimes we go in going, right, this is what we want to attain. This is what the outcomes are. This is how I want your mindset to look. Well, actually, have you scoped in any time for your player to ask you a question? Have you given them an opportunity? So if you were to coach a young person to go into a session with a manager or individual, and they were to say to you, right, Michelle, I want some questions that I can ask my coach or teacher just to look at how I could develop my mindset, or even to explore, right, a conversation about developing a positive mental image. What sort of questions could you set them up with if they came to you?
It's all about self-awareness. The more self-aware and the more aware of their mindset, that, we're all shaped by our parents, let's face it, right? So if you understand their baseline mindset and you understand their level of self-awareness, those are huge, right? Because if you know you're dealing with someone who is pessimistic, doesn't have a can-do attitude, that's going to be someone that needs a little extra attention and support, because you have to shift that, right? That's going to be an energetic drag, basically, right? And then the level of self-awareness, like understanding how your emotions play into your actions, right? If you're aware of, how your emotions affect your actions, how that circle goes, right? Like thought, emotion, action, how it all ties together. It all starts with a thought. If your thought is negative, that's going to create this domino effect, right? So how do we get people to realize it starts with a positive thought. A positive thought invokes a positive action, which invokes a positive result most of the time. So we really have to get people to realize that. So I would ask questions around self-awareness. I'd ask questions around how they view challenges in life. Are they tools for teaching, or are they like, detrimental? Like, you don't know the household that they were raised in. My mother was one of the most negative people that I ever met. My father, similar, right? But they had their own stuff. So it influences, just being in that space with people who may not be as optimistic or positive.
And I've been in those situations where I've perhaps had close friends, and sometimes I've withdrawn myself from a situation because I felt it was better for me in terms of my own mental well-being, and how that has come across. Because when they're in their very negative spaces and they're perhaps pessimistic about certain situations, they start to see what might be negative in every situation that you might explore personally. So therefore you might go, oh, actually, I want to study at this level. And they go, why do you want to study? What's it going to do? It's going to give you more stress. You're going to do X, Y, and Z. Or actually, you're going to invest so much in terms of having a university course. Why do you want all that debt? So therefore, they're not really utilizing that position, or they've been influenced by other people. It's giving them a perspective, and their perspective is, well, actually, I don't want to do this because X, Y, and Z have said don't do it. And therefore, they don't want to explore it for themselves because they're only listening to personal experience off other people. Well, actually, you might go and delve into it, take their considerations on, and go, actually, I do agree with some elements in terms of what they've said there. I perhaps didn't enjoy it for myself, or I'm going to walk away. Or actually, I understood what they said, but actually, I'm enjoying this more than they even realized, and more than I realized because of what they said. And sometimes it's about jumping into those situations and not just taking on board what every individual says to you, because sometimes we can listen to too much, and then we can put ourselves in a position where we might withdraw ourselves from even entering a possibility because of the information that someone else has given us based on their own opinion.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, so it's so true. I mean, you got to check your circle of who's in your ear the most. And you also have to do the work in terms of knowing yourself and knowing what you value and what matters most to you. So that inner voice is the loudest voice, and the voices around the table become much more, insignificant than your own voice,
And sometimes I see that with some of the professionals that I work with, and they're very good at what they do, but they're very negative towards the work that they have because they might have a heavy workload. They might have a lot of stress levels, which they're having. They might have to balance a lot across. And therefore, when it comes across in the way that they deliver their work in terms of not with the young people, but in terms of what they do in the team, sometimes it's easier not to have a meeting with them because they're very easy to voice their opinions about all the negatives, whereby I might sit at the table and go, actually, we're working towards this. We've seen a big improvement of our operations in the last 6 months because we're actually implementing this. Maybe you could utilize this a little bit more and therefore contribute to this in the team. And therefore, once you have that negative mindset, can we turn it into a bit more a positive? So understand that you've got a big workload, understand that you might have taken on more. Actually, could you allocate a little bit more time to doing a bit of this and maybe less time to doing that? And therefore, we can have that conversation with someone above you about, actually, do I need to be doing this piece of work, or actually is there another way of doing this piece of work so it's not taking up so much of my time? So it's sometimes about strategy to understanding what is ahead of you, and just again utilizing a position where you can ask questions or pose it in a different way that allows you to enter situations to overcome barriers and obstacles and turn it into what you can really frame inequality, and then utilize your position to improve that current perspective that you're in, to try and give you that positive outlook towards the future and get through that black tunnel.
Absolutely. Great.
So, and I think alluding to that a little bit is when we have a lot placed on us, especially the young people. So when they go into it and we think, right, they enter school at 8:30 in the morning, they don't leave till 3:00, 3:30. Within that time, they've experienced 5 different lessons. They might have had a registration period within that. They've then had 2 social breaks whereby they're with their peers. And then they might have come from a stressful home life. Now, for some of those who have maybe a little bit of a better quality of life, they might go into a sports club in the evening evening. So therefore they're out 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. They're then tired. They then got to do a bit of homework. They haven't seen much of the evening, or they're staying up late to try and make up for the time that they felt that they might have lost doing sports. And that is understandable when you're a young person, because you're like, right, sometimes you just want to go out from school and just chill out. But then they might get what is a bit of burnout. Now, I know you're very keen in terms of burnout, how that looks for an individual.
Right.
And when you see burnout, what are some of the elements that you see before they even happen to an individual in terms of the burnout considerations?
Overwhelm. I can't tell you how many teachers get on coaching calls with me in tears. They're completely overwhelmed. And while they want to look at the immediate situation that's created the overwhelm, I always start with the basics. Are you sleeping? It's amazing how many people will continuously shave hours off their sleep and then think that they can go and perform at the same level. Okay? It happens so often, right? I get teachers saying I needed to stay up and grade papers. I needed to do this for my children. I needed to do this. I was binge watching Netflix, like whatever it is. The first thing that goes are valuable hours of sleep. When we show up at our workday inadequately rested, we put ourselves at a severe disadvantage to handle stress. Our body's way of recovering is through sleep. And when we rob ourselves of sleep, we're robbing ourselves the opportunity to recover and recharge and be capable of handling the stress that's waiting for us every day. So sleep is always one of the first things I will always ask an overwhelmed teacher. Are you sleeping? Have you moved your body? Have you gotten outside and gotten fresh air? Have you done anything that you like? Like over the weekend, did you do something for you? Or did you just give? Because we know our educators give to a fault. They continuously give until the fact that they have nothing left to give. So it's the basics. I mean, burnout is a culmination of self-neglect at all levels, from sleep to hydration to diet to movement to stress management strategies like meditation. All of that leads up to burnout because you're just not doing anything to fill your cup, or you're doing the minimum to keep going. And we know doing the minimum is not going to be sustainable. It will catch up with you.
I think that's important as well in terms of that burnout and that consideration, because sometimes you might go, actually, I'll go to bed now at 12, I'll wake up for 6 and work in the morning, and then I might try and get in. Well, actually, you're going to be tired. You're then going to maybe not have time to have breakfast. You've then gone into work because you wanted to get in early because you're stressing about what you got for your day. And therefore, by 8:30, when your registration group comes in, you might have been working for an hour and a half, and therefore you're already lacking some of the energy levels off what you've done for the last hour and a half, but then you haven't slept well either, nor had breakfast. Your registration group comes in, and then you're straight into teaching. You might not have a break then until 11 o'clock in the morning. So you're flat out for maybe 5 hours as soon as you get up without actually recovering from the last day. Now, recovery is what people believe that they might sacrifice because they have such stressful lives and they might be trying to balance so much. They're not actually realizing, or actually, if I don't have enough sleep or if I don't allocate time for recovery, then it's actually going to be so detrimental to me. So I might feel that I'm trying to achieve more, but actually I'm undermining myself in the process as well.
Yeah, and it goes beyond yourself. It's your energy that you bring with you, or the lack of energy you bring with you. I ask teachers all the time, do you not think that your students can pick up on your energy when you're half with it? Right? Like I had a teacher I was coaching. I tell you, Luca, I had conversation after conversation encouraging her to try some of my strategies. I was like, okay, just try this. No, it didn't work. I tried it. It didn't work. Okay. Week after week, finally, she broke down and did some of the things. Like she went for a run on the weekend. She forced herself to get to bed early. She did a couple of things. And she started her morning in a calm state. That's another thing that I like to share with people. She said, Michelle, I have the most difficult students. I was like a different human being. In my interactions with them, I had more patience. Because I had more patience, they corresponded to me in an entirely different way. All because I took care of myself and I felt good. I bought a different energy and I had more patience. And that created an entirely different interaction with one of the most difficult students I had. And I'm like, do you see the magic of this? It's our energy. It's showing up the best that we can be. So many teachers do this work because they love watching children grow and expand and become these brilliant youngsters, right? You lose that. You lose why you became a teacher in the first place if you don't show up your best self and give them what you can give them, to see their reaction and see their exchange with you and have it be positive. Right? It's just amazing. So I would say, it's so beyond yourself. It's who you are. It's even the energy you bring back into your home at night with your family. How are you showing up to your partner if you've been depleted all day and you come home at night, and your kids are there or your partner's there? Like, are they getting a good version of you? Because I would venture to say probably not.
And I think when you start your day in a calm way, I think that's important as well, because even considering what you need to maybe achieve in the morning before your registration group comes in, I think there's a lot which you can really put pressure on yourself to do with. Oh, I've only got this amount of time to do this. I need to get this, and this done. And therefore, you're putting yourself in a heightened state before you've even started teaching for that day. And therefore, you're stressing yourself out. Well, actually, if you don't get that done, what is the worst that could happen? Well, actually, you might not be as prepared as you'd like for your lesson, but you have enough years' experience behind you to deliver that lesson in a different way, whereby you can overcome the resources that you might be lacking. So sometimes we try to place an emphasis on things which we don't need to place an emphasis on, because we've built up such a mindset and fixation on an element or component. Actually, our experience can lead us to go, actually, we don't need to fixate on that. There's an easy way around this. We can actually adapt during the moment. And I think, again, that comes to filling your cup and those realization moments of those good qualities that you have. You have that experience. You're able to manage a class. You're able to have that experience. And therefore, can you apply it when you're in that situation to overcome what you might see as a barrier and to reduce your stress level so you can start the day in a very calm manner? I think that's a bit of a coaching process, which does happen over a period of time.
Yeah, it's such a poignant point to make for any educator who's listening. One of the things I learned, so I've logged now almost 4,000 coaching hours just with educators over the past few years. I did the math. I went through, figured that out. So it's a lot of hours. Listening to the educators that I coached, one of the biggest things that I realized was they were not starting their day with intentionality. They were going to bed late. They were hitting snooze. They were catapulting out of bed, grabbing coffee, getting in car, getting into traffic, dealing with stress in the car, getting to work, more stress. They were not starting their day off with any degree of intentionality or calmness. So I challenge my clients to take 10 or 15 minutes just for themselves. It doesn't have to be a complex thing. It could literally mean you just sit down and you have a cup of tea and you think about how you want the day to go. Otherwise, you will be at the effects of the day. How we start our day will create a domino effect. If you start your day off with a little bit of intentionality and a little bit of calmness, you're the conductor of the day versus, being at the effects of whatever unfolds. So that's my biggest piece of advice. Stop falling into your day and start your day with a little bit of intentionality and a little bit of peace, a little bit of calm, where you fill your cup, have a cup of tea, do something for you, just a little 15 minutes just for you before you rush out and start helping everyone else.
I think the way you put that as well is really important. The way that you start your day and the effects of the day, and to be the conductor of your day so you can have a bit of intentionality across it. So I think it's really important to go, right, what do I want to achieve today? And I think there's some questions which I've looked at before. What have I achieved this week? What have I achieved in the last 3 months? What have I achieved in the last 6? Because even if we're not setting ourselves up to look at what we can achieve throughout the day or that intention, actually, can we look back then and frame it in a different way so we can just flip the script a little bit and just ask, what have we achieved? And that little bit of achievement might give you a foundation towards a positive mindset of what the next 3 months might look like, and go, actually, I've done this in 3 months. What can I do in the next 3 months that builds on top of that? And I think just the way the conductor of your day, I think, is really important, because sometimes for a young person, when they might go into school, they might go, we got these rules. Teachers want this from me. I've got to do this. And then therefore, when they're living with their parents and at home, etc., they're Yeah, morals. And when they
Oh,
come to it, they're like, "Sir, I just don't control my life. I can't wait to be 16, 17, 18, get a job, maybe move out." And sometimes I can really resonate with them and understand, because I'm like,
yes.
well, I was young once. I can really feel that you don't have room to breathe. You're being squeezed from all areas. You just want a bit of freedom. And when they're not conducting things, and you can see this, I think, shift and change as well, is, and I appreciate it with young people as well sometimes, and we look at it as educators as like, well, actually, young people don't control the narrative, we do. This is school, and this is what happens. Well, actually, all this young person is trying to do is take a little bit of ownership, because they're just trying to find a moment to breathe. And they might be looking to seem as if they're controlling the situation, but all they're trying to do is just give themselves a bit of breathing space and go, can I be part of this process? How can this look for me? And taking a little bit more of ownership. And I think it just comes about understanding that. And I think it's really difficult when you get those educators or people who are experiencing their professions and have been in certain ways for such a long time. It's
Yeah.
very difficult for them to come out of that as an educator, like you have been talking about, to be coached as well. So there is coaching children and young people, there is coaching teachers, and I think those situations of intentionality is so important. And that conductor day is so great. And it just makes me think of, I was talking to a head teacher back last month, and he said, if you had a TripAdvisor review of your classroom, what would you want that to say? And I think that has stayed with me ever since. I was like, well, actually, I want that to resonate with me in terms of how that looks over the next 20 years of teaching. And just even posing
Yeah.
that and the way that you say that really have brought two concepts, which are great considerations for me to take away. Because how would you want your classroom to look? How would you want your playing field to look? How would you want your team to perform? If you want them to perform in a certain way, how does the change room look? How does the environment? How does the relationships? And
Yeah.
once you ask all these questions, you could be coaching yourself, you could be coaching your team in terms of
Yeah.
mindset. And I think there's so many different considerations about how that comes across.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. I mean, I love that you said, like, also before when you were talking about like what have I accomplished? You're getting yourself to think about the positive. You, like, remember I said the mind's not wired to make you happy. The mind is wired to protect you. So it's organically going to want to always be thinking about your problems because it's trying to keep you alive. In the morning, we have almost like a clean slate. We've hit pause because we've had our rest. It's such a beautiful opportunity to do a little reflection on, well, what is good? What is good? Let me suspend where the mind wants to go, because the mind wants to think about all the problems I have and all the things I need to give my attention to. Let me just have a cup of tea for 15 minutes and just reflect on, like, what's the good stuff? Because I do have some good stuff. The problem is I'm stepping over all the good stuff to focus on the bad stuff. So I get to choose where I put my focus. So I'm going to choose that I'm going to focus on, I have a healthy partner. I'm healthy. My children are healthy. It's a beautiful spring day, whatever it is. Like, but when we focus on that stuff, it expands. So we want to make sure we spend some time in gratitude and focusing on the good stuff.
I think that's important as well. Time of gratitude, and there's just little things in life. So I know when I'm driving into work in the morning, I've got a maybe stressful day ahead. I've got a lot of things that I need to deal with and manage. It might be it might be a heightened day because some of the young people coming in are heightened, and therefore I've got a group of collectives whereby there's going to be a big situation. But even driving into work and going, well, actually the sky's very blue. It's nice and shiny this morning. There's a bit of fresh air. For me, I'll take all those into consideration. Whereby when I've got a young person in the classroom, they might not even consider these little things when they go outside, or little things of their life, and I think it's so important. But just before you go, Michelle, because I'm so conscious of time, how did you get into coaching? What took you into it, and when did you realize it was for you?
Oh, it's such a funny story. I'm glad you asked, because most people don't ask this question. I never, ever set out to be a coach. I will tell you. I started my practice after leaving corporate America 5 years ago, roughly 5 years ago. And I just wanted to help people preserve their emotional well-being, right? At first I was an advocate, and then I was like, no, we need to get ahead of it. I want to share how I help myself, because I was diagnosed with depression when I was going through a divorce. So I just genuinely wanted to help people. I had this relationship with a school district that I had worked with. I delivered an after-school program when I worked in my corporate world. And I had this relationship. So I reached out and said, hey, I have a resilience program. I would love to come and share with your teachers because I bet they're struggling. It was right around COVID. And he said, yeah, come. And I came. And professional development here in the US is sort of like, give me a pillow. I'm checking a box. I'm not really into it. And so here I was trying to talk to them about resilience, take care of themselves, and they were quiet. And I left there so frustrated because they're very private. Here in the States, educators are extremely private. They're not sharing about their personal life unless it's like their teacher bestie. They're not sharing, right? So I came home just totally frustrated. So I called my superintendent and I said, oh my goodness, let me coach them one-on-one. There'll be nobody, it'll be totally confidential. Just let them come to me one-on-one. I want to give them all of these resilience strategies. I want to help them. And he said, okay, let's try. Let's do a pilot. And the rest is history. And it's been how many years and how many hours of coaching and hundreds of teachers' lives touched here in the state of New Jersey, which I'm really proud of. But it truly just came from my desire to give them this information in a way that worked for them. So
what a way to get into it. And I think that's what my passion was when I got into coaching, was that desire to see young people and individuals grow. And that's what really leads me into educating and what I loved each day looking back. So I might go, do you know what, today was really stressful, but this one young person took this way, or I saw them smile and they're able to take that away. So it's been really great to chat to you, Michelle. And I'm definitely glad that we get this in the time frame that you wanted it done in. But the way that you organized it and the way that that came across was so great as well. So I really appreciate it. And we covered so much within the episode, but I know we are just touching the substance of some of it. But we can find you across a lot of your socials in terms of Twitter. There's the website that you have as well. You can be found on YouTube, TED Talks, and there's other further links which I'm going to share in the bio. But there's so many different places, and the great work that Michelle does is what everyone else can find. And I just really do appreciate you finding time in your day to come on the podcast, because it has been great to talk to you, especially when there's been so many different components where it's more than just a podcast call, but a lot to take away. And there's just one idea which I have where I'm going to maybe develop a lesson because of something you said as a result of that now. So I think it's great in terms of that time. And so it's a big thanks from me, Michelle.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for finding me and for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Well, take care. Enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy.
Awesome. Thank you.
But yeah, we try to be that group that can help be there for the players as a three, because I think you mentioned earlier, you want to have different characters in the changing room. You want to have different personalities. You don't want the same kind of people, because you're not going to be able to move forward. If you've got 10 people and they all agree the same things, you're going to get to a point in time where actually you're going to become unstuck. You need that one person to actually be like, nah, I don't agree with that. Or actually, we should try this. And I think that's why the huddle works, is we're all quite different as human beings. And I think you need 3 different people in there, because some players will naturally gravitate towards me and my personality, but equally some might go to the other 2, and that's absolutely fine.